Today we're going to talk about the phenomenon known as tire cupping. If we take a closer look at the tire here and you run your hand over it, you notice that it's not smooth and that the tire treads are at different heights. And the reason this happens, it's actually speculated that it is insufficient dampening force in the suspension system of the vehicle. Essentially what happens is you have over spring rate. In the front of these sprinters they have a transverse leaf, so imagine you have a leaf going like this. There's too much spring rate and the tire is actually bouncing while you're going down the road instead of staying planted, acting as if it has no dampening force. This is caused from overweighing the van and failing of shocks. So on this particular van, we're gonna actually swap out the tires because you can feel all these vibrations in the road with the tire cupping. We're gonna swap the tires out, get some new rally struts on the front. It's probably one of the best front suspension upgrades you can do to a Sprinter van, given the geometry of the suspension itself. So I'm gonna get the wheels off and get right into it, and let's get started. If you're someone who's in constant cold or freezing temperatures, they want you to set it to that soft cold setting. And to do this, we're gonna rotate the shock shaft in that 360 degrees that they desired, indicating with the arrow here. Where do you spend most of your warm weather? Or?
Well, most of the warm weather's in SoCal, but definitely
performance.
Colorado.
Yeah, but you don't spend a whole.
No.
So we're gonna set it on the performance setting. He goes up to the snow occasionally, so in that case, you know, he's gonna spend most of his time in a warmer climate. We'll recommend the performance setting. So to do so, performance, they indicate you spin the shaft clockwise. So a good indication is to put a dot on the end of the shock shaft. So that way when the dot makes a complete circle, you know for sure that you've done the full 360 degrees. I'm gonna grab a Sharpie real quick, then we'll do that. Now we're gonna go ahead and adjust the SB2 setting on the shock. Like we said, we're gonna be setting Martine's van to performance. So I just like to put a little indicator here. So performance is going to be clockwise. I'm just going to do a 90 right here with a little dot because this is the way the shock is going to be sitting in the van. When you receive the shocks, they're going to be 90 degrees off. You're just going to make that adjustment and then you're going to spin the rest of the 360 degrees. So there's my dot. There's 180. You hear the click inside, adjusting. Boom, 360 degrees, take this one off, and then I like to just put a little P down here for performance, so that way whoever removes the shock or if someone else works on it, they are aware of what setting it was in. Let's go ahead and do the same for the other side. Do that 90, put a dot.
So the reason why we're doing this reinstall, if you will, is because this particular shock, if you see, we ended up adding the Baja bracket, but only after the fact that this bolt severed from its previous installation, unbeknownst to me. Luckily, I was visiting a client up north in Sacramento. They noticed and like, oh man, we need to get this thing back on. It was literally loose. So highly recommend, always install the Baja bracket with the shocks.
Basically here, what happened in Martine's case, not having this Baja bracket is very dangerous, especially when you're off-roading the van. And the whole idea of this bracket is to capture this shock body on not just the inside face, but the outside face of the shock as well. The shocks come from the factory using one bolt going into the frame rail. technically only giving the shock one surface to disperse all its load and force. By adding this Baja bracket here, we're giving it another shear wall to back the shock up against, and thus sandwiching the shock, not giving us possible hardware failure. This bolt is not going to break, and Van Compass even includes a very nice lock key, so you know this bolt isn't even going to back out. As far as the shock body, this valve is broken, and as you can see, we do have shock oil leaking around the shock tube as well. Essentially, when he broke this, I assume the shock was damaged. The piston probably was pushed up in a non-straight angle and created a leak. So we're going to pull this one out and get some new shocks in the rear for him. As you can see, we got oil leaking out of the adjuster valve up top. It should not be able to spin freely like this. Something's jacked up. This metal ring encapsulates a rubber bushing so that when there is not direct motion of the shock, it pretty much just adds dampening, so you're not feeling every bump from the shock transferring to the shell of the van. But it's a good idea to always replace these whenever you're doing a shock replacement. And there's our new top pad bushing. Sit just like that on the shock. A couple other pieces.